Welcome back, everybody. This is Rolling Credits. This week, Gums is back. Say hi, Gums.
Hello.
So yeah, we got Gums back. As always, we got Kirby and Pat and myself, Seth. And we are talking The Last of Us Episode 2. Again, let me preface this before we get into this. This is a spoiler-filled podcast. We're talking about the game, the show, how it compares, things like that. So if you haven't watched Episode 2 yet, maybe skip this for now and come back later. And if you have seen it, enjoy. So,
That's right.
How awesome was that last episode?
I loved it.
They're kicking off strong here. Yeah, I'm loving it.
Yeah. I wanted to start this off with the ending because we started last week's podcast talking about the beginning. I think, with them changing some things for the show, I think it kind of makes it better. And I want to talk about, with the show, they had the infected be the ones that come and kill Tess. Mm-hmm. So it's different than, I forgot the government's name.
Fedra,
yeah.
Yeah, it's different than Fedra storming the building. So I want to get your thoughts of them changing it. Do you think it worked? And I'll start with you, Kirby.
I think it was great. I think they did a great job with it. It's changed a little bit. It's the infected. It's not Fedra. But I think it really adds a little bit more of the tension to the world, and it really shows it's a great visual representation of how dangerous it is outside of the quarantine zone. Because to this point, we really haven't seen that too much. We've seen the clickers in this episode, which was awesome. But you don't really see too much of what this infection is, what the infected are. So it was a really good visual representation of it. Now just the casual viewer, the person that hasn't played a game before, they know that, there are things that you actually need to be careful of and things to fear out in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just kind of tailoring off that too, I think that if you play the game, I think in terms of pacing in a video game, the Fedra aspect of it works and it kind of makes sense. But even if you go back through and play it, if you were to adapt that scene for scene into the TV show, I don't think it would play as well. I don't think it would work quite the same because I don't think it would make as much sense as to why they were getting set up as much. I also, for those that are fans of the inside the episodes post credits of these ones, this whole scene in general really does set up very well for how they talked about the cordyceps and kind of the way that those interact with the world, about how everything communicates with each other with live cordyceps, and how if I touch the ground here, it's going to notify them 2 miles away, which is what happens right in that scene. They go into it in the inside the episode about how the science of the specific species of cordyceps, that's how that works, that they do communicate with each other, and that they said that in nature it would be unreasonable for them to be able to have a QZ zone because technically speaking it would overrun everything, but they wanted to create some semblance of realism so they be able to say hey, if Joel did step on this cordyceps here, it would technically speaking notify all the other infected miles away. So that is kind of why that scene typically kind of tries to make sense. And I do appreciate the way they talked about how they're trying to take just this kind of little bit realism aspect of it that I think makes it a little kind of heavier to the viewer and kind of make that transition into a video game adaptation. I think it worked very well.
It's funny you say all that because that's kind of one of the topics I'm going to bring up later. And when you told me that, when you texted that over to me, I was like, it honestly makes so much more sense why they did it that way,
Yeah.
And I kind of like that the change after the fact. At first, I was kind of bummed it wasn't Fedra, but after you said that, it honestly kind of everything clicked. And it was cool to see that creepy ass monster, the infected person stick her or his tendrils down her throat or whatever you want to call those things. Mm-hmm. That was so gross.
Yeah, the spores. Yeah.
But I think the show's doing great with everything. So, Gums, what were your thoughts on the ending there?
Yeah, it's having this question first. I'm almost scared to ruin what's coming next for our questions. But what I would say to that is that I think I liked it. I like that we got to see some actionable items from the infected. I'm glad that Fedra isn't playing such a large role as of yet, because it's allowing everything to build, and the fear and anxiety to build from the things we really should be scared of. And it kind of has that Walking Dead aspect to it, where Walking Dead, the humans are the scary ones. The zombies are just there. You know, that's how it became for The Walking Dead. At first it was like, man, these zombies suck. And then the humans became scary, right? Those were the true things to fear. And I hope we kind of keep this concept of, no, in this one, these infected are what you fear, and these humans are just there. Although in order to build a good variety and a good things, eventually the humans are going to be what are most feared, like the slavers and such like that. But I'm really enjoying the fact we get to really see the infected and how creepy they look and how they interact versus Fedra right off the bat, because just having that screen time and building those depths, I mean, it's like a good ghost story. It's like, man, I could imagine those things chasing me through the building, and somebody saying we gotta blow them up, and and get rid of them. So I'm very glad that they made this slight tweak and this slight change to that, and I think it's way more impactful than having Fedra come and raid, because we don't know crap about Fedra yet, other than they're an opposing regime. But this is nightmare fuel for me. So I'm just gonna live in my mind that some make out fungi just I don't even know what, man. This creeps me out. I don't like it.
Yeah. I do think that's the one thing that's going to keep, this show going, is it is focusing on the infected, but the human aspect of it also plays such a big part. But they're doing such a good job of building out these like creatures. Like, it is utterly terrifying. Every episode is so like tension filled and creepy.
Yeah.
I know you want to talk about the tendrils some more, because that ending scene was just so epic. But what did you guys think of all the character design? Like, in regards to all the infected, not the people, but the infected, like how the clickers looked, some of the other different types, and did it meet your expectations? Was it like everything you could have hoped for? And yeah, let's talk about that tendril kiss and how crazy that is.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, how could it really not live up to your expectations? I mean, if you looked at them like side by side, character design wise, I mean, that first clicker, it looks like it just came straight out of the game. I'm gonna kind of be a little bit of that nerdy guy today who did kind of the deep dig into the behind the episode stuff afterwards. But they even talked about that in that design process, about how they did make like 20 different character models of what the clickers were gonna wind up looking like, and no matter how much they adapted it, they just kept going back to the one that was born straight out of the video game, because they said it looked too freaky. It said it worked too well,
terrifying
for what they were going for. And he said that at the end of the day, like the one that looks just like out of the game is the one that's going to work for this. So I think that the character design that they did for that, I think the way that they kind of built, the settings with like the spores kind of on the walls and like kind of bridging that gap of how that interacts with the greater world, I think really sets us up for a really good look at the infected in this show versus like kind of maybe the people who are true to the video game.
Well, yeah, I mean, the clickers, they were spot on. And whoever their makeup artist, visual effects person, like, they need a damn raise, because they killed it.
True.
And I'm pretty sure I read something where like the rest of the cast, they didn't see like the clickers like in the makeup, like,
yeah, that was the
before
first time
scene.
they saw them. Was
Yeah,
the scene.
so there was like, oh shit. So there was like a genuine reaction. So yeah, the clickers were fantastic. The regular like infected and stuff, they just look like your run of the mill zombies. Like,
Yeah.
if they had like died in the middle of eating some ramen or something like that. So getting those tendrils
Great
coming out the
image.
mouth,
Yeah.
That is a good image.
The kiss at the end was a little weird. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was reading something else. It was like supposed to be a representation of like the kiss that she wanted to give Joel, but she couldn't because she was infected or something like that. I don't know if I buy that shit.
I don't buy that.
It was a little weird. I will say, like, it is a good way to show like how this fungus like spreads and how it continues on, goes from person to person, like through a bite or through like those tendrils. But outside of that, I was just like, this is I think this is just a gross out factor at this
It's
point.
like, did we need it, right? Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like,
We did need that.
it's one of those
I was
things.
severely grossed out by that.
Yeah, I'm actually not even saying that I'm like mad that it was in there, but it is kind of like damn, they really just threw this in for shits, huh? Like, you know,
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
And I loved it.
Cordyceps are creepy, man.
the cordyceps are creepy.
I'd agree here. So what did I think of character design this week? I thought it was amazing. I thought 100% those clickers were what those clickers were supposed to be, from the way that they looked to the way that they moved. And I think that's a very scary concept when something, you know, basically what happens is the fungus has taken over their face. And so they have no eyes. So you have to rely on their echolocation in their ears. And I just think that's crazy cool concept. Like, that is a very cool concept that they did. And so it was very scary. The color palette that they used for the clicker's face and such gave it this fleshy, infected tone that was just like, ugh, I don't want to look at this too long. Like, it just don't look right, you know, and you don't want to look at it too long, but you're also so pulled in by it. And then, you know, meeting that first clicker, you're like, yeah, it's on. Like, the music kicks in, they're running around, they're scared, and I played the game, and in the game, I kept dying to the clickers because I thought I could fight them.
Yes.
I thought this was Resident Evil. I thought I could survive. Man, I was getting my butt whooped. And I ended up putting the game down for months after that because I just couldn't. I didn't understand the patience. You know, I hadn't played Elden Ring yet. I didn't know about the patience you needed to have in these types of games. And I was just pissed. And I was like, this is stupid. But for the tendril kiss at the end, so disgusting. Like, this, just the way they do this. And it's so nasty. But, you know, it kind of makes you think of that concept of, does the fungi really need to be this aggressive? Or is it because we're fighting them is the reason they're biting us? So if you were to sit there and take it, knowing you're already infected, and let's say that fungi was already taking over her brain and communicating with the other fungi, and she couldn't move that well, would that fungi just come over and say the easiest way into her body is right here through her mouth already? It's by her neck is where she was bit. I'll just, you know, this is how I'll engage. Obviously, they threw it in there for shits, but like, if you didn't fight the fungi, would it assimilate you that way instead of biting you? Just kind of enter through your mouth or your nose, or just give you a little whisper kiss through your ear and infect your brain?
Yeah.
And so it kind of gives you that aspect of maybe that's what it would do if you didn't fight it. I mean, like, hell, I'm going to fight it. So let's not even go there. But I think that kiss was a great awe factor. I think it was progressively nasty. I think it gave the actor really good screen time. I was very pissed off about how long it took to light that lighter. And yeah, that's my comments on that section. Just a stellar scene and a fun way to do things.
You kind of brought something to my mind here, and I want to just ask this real quick. It seems like at the end of the episode, you know, you said like the person was attracted to Tess, like it knew that she was infected. Do you think that like that might be something that the show's gonna spin with Ellie? Because like the infected didn't chase after Tess, and she just stood there, and she was still basically human. Like, she had the infection, but she was still human. But it seemed like they weren't after her. They kept running towards Joel.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they could go that route because, like, you know, in the previous episode when they tested Ellie, it came back like it was showing red, so she's infected. But of course, she has that immunity, so it's entirely possible that every time they come up against a horde, they're not going after Ellie, they're going after Joel. So
yeah, that could
it'd be
be
interesting to
cool.
see. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they do something with that, or if they just kind of let that go by the wayside.
Yeah, that's a great question, because she was attacked. She got her second bite.
Oh yeah,
right.
It's true.
So she ended up getting her second bite. So it's like, I think because she's infected in one way doesn't mean she's affected in another, and I'll explain that. She's been bitten. She has the infection within her, but the hive mind cannot take over due to her immunity.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's no connection with her as a host. Therefore, they still chase her.
Mm-hmm.
She can be ripped apart. Whereas the other woman, she clearly was infected in the brain, and the hive mind had already started to take over and make her, you know.
Which is a quote directly
Not allowed
from
to
the
move.
game that was like, you're not immune to getting ripped apart. Right,
Yeah.
like that is
Yeah.
that is a quote directly from that. That it is like because she doesn't get bit the second time in the game. She doesn't
No.
get bit twice in the game in those early
Mhm.
scenes. That's an addition, but they do make it very clear that it's like the clicker can still rip your face off, like kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like that is, I think, going to be a thing where it's like there's probably still going to chase Ellie. I think.
That's
Yeah.
probably why they put that in, actually, the second bite for this episode, to show that she is different than somebody who's infected. So
Yeah, to like
Yeah.
kind of make a
Maybe-
little proof out of it. Like
exactly. So
yeah.
maybe that was on purpose. I don't know. It was just a thought. It was going to turn into World War Z
Definitely.
for a second.
Yes.
I love the design of all of them. I thought the tendril kiss was wild, and it's going to be interesting to see how the infection spreads. And I know we've been talking a lot about spores and, you know, the hive mind and things like that. So I wanted to bring up the next point, because obviously this episode introduced us really to a hive mind, and instead of having the spore spread by air, if you like step on one, it's all on the ground and on the walls. If you step on one, it, you know, it contacts all of the infected in the area. Do you think this is kind of like more terrifying? What are your thoughts on this? And I am gonna start here with you, Gums.
Yeah, so I think this is the greatest edit to what they could have done from the game to this series. Is instead of making it open to this fact that it spreads through the air and these spores, and which is gonna just leave a crap ton of plot holes. It's just we're not gonna believe it, right? We just won't believe it as much. So switching to these tendrils, and then saying that these folks, just like a forest, they can talk to each other from miles and miles away, I think is a very, very smart thing to do by the producers. And it's also very, very scary, right? Because everything's a trap. Everything you touch, everything you see, the sounds you make. But it allows our characters to run through and not worry about having to breathe in certain locations or wear gas masks all the time to hide their faces. And I bet there will be a few times where they might still do so. But I really enjoy that they changed this aspect and really took the spores out of the air, and then made all the cordyceps connected and able to alert each other and run around. I just think that was genius. I really am looking forward to the cool traps they're going to set, because you got this
Yeah.
hive mind that alerts. Like, there's going to be some positions where you got to alert them and just dip set. Like, you just got to go like, I'm out of here.
I think we're getting
So-
that next episode. We gotta imagine,
hope so.
right? I think
Oh,
I
yeah.
hope so.
Yeah.
I think
So
we're getting
that's-
into traps next week. Like,
That's my big thing about that, and that's a great question, Seth. And I think that was the single best thing they could have done, is take it out of the air and put it into this hive mind that can talk to each other over long distances.
I just want to see somebody throw a brick at something, have them get distracted.
yeah.
Okay?
I want to see someone throw a bottle and have it fucking work. That's all I want to
Yeah.
know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
we did
Bunch of
get
pocket
Joel.
change.
We did get Joel reloading this week, and that's always so frustrating.
Yes,
The
that's
revolver.
fair. That's fair.
Mhm.
I'm also in the same boat as you, Gums. I think having the hive mind and changing it is, first of all, absolutely terrifying. Like, the zombies, like the infected, reminded me of like World War Z type fast. Like, they're just so creepy. And I think seeing some like future scenes play out where you have, you know, Joel and Ellie running and you just have this like crazy swarm right behind them, I think that'll make for some really cool visuals. And I don't know, it's just so much more scary. So
Mhm. Yeah.
Pat, what do you think?
I mean, I'm on board too. I just got to give a lot of credit to these producers in the way that they're writing the producers and these writers and these like screenplay actors and whatnot, because the way that they are just like really doing the research here. Because I'm gonna go back to kind of my earlier point about what they were talking about in the behind the episode about just kind of a little bit of the science of it, just their ability to, like, I mean, obviously the game itself originally took a fungus that does exist and is you know relevant in ants, you know, that can, you know, attack the ants' minds, and then these producers went the extra mile and said, okay, in this actual fungus, how would this act relative to humans if this would kind of go down? And I think, to Gums's point, it just adds this layer. Even if you don't fully know it, you kind of can very easily palette this change and kind of see what's happening. And it makes it infinitely kind of just more terrifying, because there's just always this back of your mind now where you're like, because especially with all the press that's been coming out about how this is like a real fungus that exists in ants and these other species and shit like this. So everyone's kind of watching the show now going, it's kind of heavier than I thought I was going to really be here. And we talked a little bit about this last week, but like it kind of sets the tone to be like, man, this is terrifying if this was ever real. And you're like, are we that far off from this being real? And then it kind of gets even scarier. And so it's like,
that's the scary part.
Yeah. So it's
Listen.
like that becomes, and the weight of it becomes just so much more intense. And I think it was a great addition to the show.
If this ever happens, just take me out back. One of you, I don't want. I'm out. I'm done.
I'll do it. I got
more.
you.
Okay. Kirby.
Yeah, at first I wasn't sure about it. Just because, you know, I loved the game. I'm like, oh, like I was in that camp of like no spores, okay. Like I was pretty indifferent about it, but kind of leaning on the side of like, oh well, it's okay, it's a change, whatever. But the more we see, you know, how it affects the world, and the more I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is like a great change, and it is fucking scary, because that is like, we are in a situation now where like one wrong step and you could have just like a fucking horde on your ass,
Literally.
and that's just terrifying. So yeah, I think it was a great way to go. And I do think that you know, speaking of like, you know, the games and the shows having like different pacing and stuff like that, I do think it would kind of disrupt the pacing of the show if they have to like stop every time they go into a new area and like throw on the gas mask or some shit like that. So yeah, I think that, you know, just overall, the more I thought about it, it's just a great change that they've made. So
They'd have to make it realistic. The gas mask gets stuck.
And remember too, this isn't just like step on this and a horde swarms, but you could just be like sitting there making camp and you've touched something 30 minutes ago, and finally the horde arrives at like 45-minute mark. Yeah. And you guys are just going to bed, and it took them 45 minutes to rush over. So there's this delayed horde that's coming for you all of a sudden. It's
and
like,
all you hear is the rumble, like the footsteps, like hitting the ground. Like that's
instantaneous is scary, but you're already perked up kind of waiting for something. But you're talking about something that's delayed like 15 to 20 minutes, and you just totally let your guard down and it comes.
Yeah.
I mean,
because you may not know. Like, you may not know. Like, you could be walking through the forest, you don't see that shit on the ground. You step on it, you're moving along at a normal pace, and there's like, what the fuck's that noise? And then all of a sudden, like, oh shit,
climb the trees.
This is my nightmare.
Yeah, could you imagine? Because it's like they said like 2 miles away. They said that it could like communicate to them. Like, wild.
I really want to see if any animals get infected. Like, I really want to. I always love it when they do like the dogs or the. Yeah. But I want something cooler. Like, I want like the zoo to be infected, and I want to see the tigers and the rhinos come out.
A giraffe.
And they're just oh my god, a giraffe with the long intestine tongue thing. Ah, man.
That would be a change from the game, but I would be open to that. I would be open to that. Man, this show's just too damn good. Last thing I want to talk about here is, you know, the intros. The intros have been absolutely like phenomenal. And I don't think I've ever had like a show where it's just like caught me from like the start like that. Like, obviously the first week we had, you know, the more backstory. And then this week we had like them looking into the infection and seeing what's happening with that person. And you get the first look at the tendril. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just think it's so crazy. And for what I want to see, like, is there something you guys want to see that show next week first? And I think I want to answer that first because I kind of already answered part one of that question. But for next, you know, for future episodes, I want to see more of like the infected scenes like we got last week, and seeing like it slowly get overrun by cities, and like seeing the like how some of these different health organizations meet and take over and try to battle this infection. And I think that would be kind of a cool little clip to see, especially like with how tense each of these are and like how big of an issue this really is. I think I want to see that moving forward. Pat.
Yeah, I think the cold opens have been just such a great addition to like just the overall lore. And I think in terms of like what I want to see, I want to see them actually kind of keep, because right now every cold open we've had have been scenes and information we didn't get from the video game. And I think that they provide so much better context and just help the overall pacing of the show. Kind of like, so what Kirby's been saying about how, like, game adaptation versus a TV show, that pacing can kind of get some friction. I think these cold opens have done a very good job of providing a lot of backstory, a lot of context, and like just creating the overall lore that exists within The Last of Us. So I actually want to kind of see them just continuing to do that and just providing backstory and like lore that exists. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be about the infection. I can do backstory lore on Joel and the family and things that I didn't know about, or about the Fireflies and what that was like in the early years of before Fedra really kind of took hold of what was going on. I want to keep the idea that every cold open is a piece of scene that I actually haven't seen before from the games, and just provides better lore. So I want to keep them, just keep pace, keep doing what you're doing, because so far you're knocking it out of the park.
Kirby?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with both of you guys. It's the two intros that we've seen so far. It's like the first episode set up what the show is going to be about. The second one just really started to show a little more of that backstory and how it started to become like an issue. And I'm hoping that as we move forward, there's more progression. We see more of the backstory and all that stuff. And I know Seth, I think after this last episode, you and I were talking about World War Z.
Yeah.
And I was saying that I love the way that World War Z plays out, because in the beginning it kind of details like the rise of the zombie infection and how it, like, the world started to collapse on itself and stuff like that. So I'd love to see that played out through the like these intros. It'd be really cool to see. And it does give, a little bit more depth to the world that we know already.
Yeah, for me, like, one of the best parts of the episode was they said, okay, how do we fight it, right? And they're in, where were they, Malaysia or something like that?
Jakarta,
Indonesia.
Jakarta,
Indonesia. And then she was just like, bomb it, fucking bomb the whole city, bomb everything. Like, I need to go be with my family.
Chilling.
And it's just like the setup of, it's just adding, like, we talk about lore, right? Yeah, we're adding scope here. Mm-hmm. We're adding scope. We're adding some lore to it. And then we're adding this emotional bond to whatever's happening. And then it dives us from that right into the story of, like, okay, now they're going to be going on their adventure. And then, oh, look at this. This is where the bombs drop. They mention it. Some of it worked. Some of it didn't. And so I really love that in between and that go between like this high level lore having nothing really to do with some of these characters. It feels like it's 2023 in there. You know what I mean? It feels like that's where we would be. We're those guys that are like, oh my God, we got to bomb it and this and that. And then they zoom in to the story of The Last of Us. And then it allows us to watch from this outside perspective, like, okay, what would we do here? Right? Like, what are we going to do? So I really enjoyed that zooming in and zooming out perspective, where it makes us understand and feel and see the scope of things. And then it zooms us into the small story that's taking place in this world. And then we get to watch, and we got to be quiet. And, you got to breathe right, because the clicker might hear you, and it's not real. And you're like, like, you don't like this. So that's my opinion on it. Keep it up. Really enjoy that about it, and I hope it continues to have that 10 to 15 minutes of the episode be that way. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, the imagery of her, like, as her, like, hand is shaking with the tea in her hand, and she tells him to bomb the city, and then just says, "Please take me back to my family," assumingly to die, right? Yep. Like, to go back into, like, never see that, to basically get bombed out of the sky or turn into, an infected. Is just so bone chilling. And we said the same thing about last week's episode about how the cold open was so just numbing in and of itself and terrifying, and they back to backed it with this. And I think that you're right, like, the way they moved it back into the scope with the shells in the city helped so much.
It's such a terrifying just entrance into this world, and they have done just such a phenomenal job. And before I leave you guys here, I did want to point out one last thing, that, this show is doing so freaking well. I mean, it got 5.7 million viewers across HBO and HBO Max streams, which basically makes it the largest audience increase from a first episode to the second on HBO. And I just think that's like such a crazy statistic to think about of all the shows that came before it. So clearly they're doing something right, and I hope this continues.
Oh yeah,
Oh, it
So
will.
it's a huge number.
100%.
yeah. One last thing here before we let you guys go. I did want to let you know, if you go to our Rolling Credits podcast Instagram page, there's a link tree there. So if you go to rolling_credits_podcast, if you hit that link tree, there's going to be a Discord and different channels you can follow. In the Discord, we're going to be doing like weekly giveaways, some trivia, different things like that. So make sure you follow us there, and we'll add you in. Other than that, Gums, send us off.
As Joel once said, you have no idea what loss is. At least not yet. Let's keep it rolling.